Welcome to another episode of Get Wisdom. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This week, Creator discusses expecting the unexpected in dark times. There's a lot to go over. There's things in the hopper, so to speak, Carl, and the fact that these are dark times, I think people understand that, but there's more coming, and people should be expecting the unexpected.
Yeah, we're expecting a tough year. This is going to be one of the more severe years in a while. We don't have a world war going on. That's true, at least not yet. I think they're trying to get one going. But there's plenty of other things to worry about. A lot of strife, a lot of contentiousness, and backbiting, and demonstrations, and political wrangling, and also disruption of economies. And it all traces back to the darkness. So there's dark forces at work, and they're trying to squeeze us. So this show is about how that it comes about, and the kinds of things that are going on, and what we can expect, and how to expect the unexpected, because it's likely to play out worse than we think, at least for a while.
Absolutely. Yes, Creator. Can Creator bookend this discussion for us by commenting on two terms that are diametrically opposed extremes, the paranoid and the Pollyanna? Merriam-Webster defines paranoid as, quote, having extreme or unreasonable fear or suspicion, unquote. It defines Pollyanna as a person characterized by irrepressible optimism and a tendency to find good in everything. Another way to characterize the two extremes is the paranoid feels unsafe when there is no evidence of threat, while the Pollyanna feels safe when there is stark evidence of danger all around. Our society today lauds the Pollyanna and disparages the paranoid. A wise person likely considers both to be naive. What is Creator's perspective?
All right. And this is what I channeled from Creator of all that is. These are Creator's words. Our perspective is that both states of mind or states of being are actually abnormal, because neither serves the person in being steady in alignment with reality, emotionally and mentally as well. One can look at the consequences for the paranoid and having an unpleasant time living with the burden of fear as being the one with greater negative implications. But tracked side by side, it might be the paranoid who survives longer if both are in a dangerous environment. The hair trigger warnings provided by the mind of the paranoid might well save them in seeing danger lurking and taking precautions, while the Pollyanna, remaining blithely unaware of anything threatening, may become a victim and taken out before they can react in a self protective fashion. Their epitaph might well be, "It was fun while it lasted," but that is hardly a useful legacy or remembrance, but would reflect what is usually the case, that both are viewed in a very superficial way. The key we are giving you here is in calling both behaviors abnormal. Something is wrong, and seriously so, with overreaction to things as well as underreaction. Many times, the seeming paranoid is responding to actual real threats, and this is rarely appreciated by outsiders. There are many things that threaten welfare and well being of people that are unseen. Things like dark spirits and spirit attachments to a person's energy, where they can carry out a campaign of bullying and terror to keep a person off balance and in a state of fear and anxiety that will often not be understood consciously. But if it evolves into a serious psychotic state producing delusional thinking, it will get noticed and branded as mental illness, when in fact, the person has a good reason to be in a state of fear and suspicion about everyone and everything if they are being stalked and tormented on a constant basis, if only deeply within the mind. We are not saying the delusions are always real, but they are an end product of a real life problem that is still unseen and unappreciated by the medical community. The problem of mental illness will never be fully solved until the problem of dark spirit predators is accepted as a real phenomenon that can be a scourge undermining the stability of the mind. The Pollyanna, in contrast, being blithely unaware of negativity, can live in a carefree and quite happy existence, at least for a time, but being unaware of reality in a fuller sense that shields them from negativity puts them at risk. And eventually their bubble will burst and they will find themselves harmed quite directly by something harmful that catches up with them. This could be many challenges, like a physical illness or a life circumstance that might have been brewing for some time, but went unrecognized and then came to a head, enforcing a confrontation that is painful or even a threat to existence. It is not normal to be a Pollyanna, as we stated, but we can tell you that such individuals get a lot of help in becoming that way. They are manipulated to make them complacent, to dull their senses and dampen their awareness. And this leaves the individual unconcerned about things. So little problems can mushroom and become big ones without the person taking any action at all because they are simply oblivious to the growing threat and will be a victim ultimately of their complacency. This state of being is engineered to happen through a mind control manipulation and is being applied throughout human society on a mass scale by extraterrestrial interlopers wanting to maintain control of humanity because they truly run the world from behind the scenes through your governments and others in authority among your institutions. The purpose is to force a state of disempowerment on the population because if you cannot sense or feel something is being taken from you and do not act, you will be diminished and will lose in some way or another. This is how civilization goes into a decline, often through a campaign of misdirection and distractions to keep the mind busy on something irrelevant but compelling. This is directly visible all around you, with people almost constantly looking at screens, not because life changing information is being sent to them, but because they are addicted to the chatter and the barrage of stimuli they experience as a reward because it engages them and keeps their mind captivated. This is in direct contrast to the reality of existence that the clock is always ticking. So there are only so many minutes and hours in a day to take care of business, see to one's obligations and responsibilities, take meaningful and planful actions to ensure things will go well and you will gain something from the day and not fritter away your life on things that are actually irrelevant because they are, in the end, merely an amusement. This is a deliberate orchestration underway to undermine society and impede human progress. At the same time, it makes you docile and easily handled, which suits your captors.
Well, this is the first time that we've really talked about the Pollyanna, and I think that's a really good word. That comes from a book, a novel that was written about a century ago. Um, but to me, that's one of the biggest problems facing humanity right now is this complacency that we talked about that's engineered by the darkness. And a thought that occurs to me, Carl, is that, you know, the paranoid is not likely to overnight become a Pollyanna, but the opposite is not the case. There could be a lot of Pollyannas become paranoid overnight.
Well, it depends. It depends on how effective the mind control manipulation is that makes them that way. So the people who are lackadaisical, maybe unaware of a lot of things, maybe just kind of thinking about themselves mostly and not so concerned about others and kind of a little less sensitive. Everyone's on a spectrum and how much hand wringing they do about hearing about adversity affecting others around the world and so on. But if they're programmed to be complacent, they don't have a say. You know,
Right.
their whole belief system will begin to be changed to reinforce that. Well, there's nothing for me to do. This isn't my problem. And they just look away and it just kind of bounces off. We all
Well,
know people kind of like that when it
oh yeah.
comes to being stimulatable and arousable to care about something, and yet they just shrug it off. And that's this complacency. It's insidious and it's universal to some degree because it's beamed into everyone.
Oh yeah. My only thought on that account is that if a paranoid person has the rug pulled directly out from underneath them, that just validates their feeling of threatened, right? The threat came real, it happened. But if a Pollyanna has the rug pulled from underneath them, they're not expecting that. And that's where I think that maybe there's a difference in those two outlooks, but neither here nor there. US Creator has been warning us about the ET threat for more than 7 years now, via Carl's channeling shared with the world via Get Wisdom. We are now, according to Creator, on the doorstep of disclosure, and the ETs making themselves known in dramatic fashion. This is not only quote unquote unexpected by most people outside of the Get Wisdom circle, but completely opposed to the beliefs of most alive today and who have lived for the last millennia or more. This makes the job of warning humanity about the threat so difficult as to be nearly impossible. Yet, here we are, with the ultimate unexpected about to unfold. Given all that humanity has faced, is there any reason to think that we should have been better prepared for this? What can Creator tell us?
All right. And this is what Creator says. In an ideal world, you would have been ahead of this long before now. But the fact this has not happened is because you're up against forces who are smarter, vastly more capable through their advanced technologies, doggedly determined, and acting through evil impulses because they are savage and ruthless psychopaths who have no ability to love or feel compassion. They despise your race of beings and at this point are looking forward to your annihilation at their hands and relish that soon to come display of power they have over you. The fact you are far behind the curve here in not realizing you are living in a kind of slave colony with only the illusion of freedom is more a tribute to the cleverness of your captors than a human failing to pay attention or keep up with what was needed to have an orderly, smooth running, and effective society. The ability to manipulate you from a distance, sight unseen, to invade the sovereignty of your mind itself, program your thinking with false beliefs, and induce destructive or self destructive behaviors changes everything about levels of responsibility. And even the possibility of choosing better and much more effective options in how to conduct your life, because at this late date, might well be too difficult or even impossible to live differently and make changes for the better, because the defects in thinking and the way society functions at this point have become too corrupted. We are painting a very dark picture here. But that does not mean all is lost, only that a solution is needed. And we will be talking about the innovations your channel is bringing forward through Get Wisdom with ways to heal the inner corruption and even those who corrupt you. That is the ultimate answer. So even though the world is greatly dysfunctional, there is always a path back to divine alignment. The problem at present is fewer and fewer people are seeking to live according to divine principles and making any kind of effort to make things truly better unless they serve the self by bringing a tangible reward. This is the mysterious fundamental cause of all the negativity and adverse circumstances in your world we refer to as the problem of evil. There are evil beings running your world. And because of their nature and makeup, as they manipulate humans to carry out their wishes, they cannot help instructing people to run the world their way with evil intent and brutal and tyrannical oversight. Their only risk is in overplaying their hand to arouse suspicion there might be some unseen outside force at work. That has been neatly dealt with thus far with a simple propaganda campaign to attribute it to human nature. This is programmed into you, in fact, to believe in and accept that as reality, that left to your own devices, sooner or later, you will lie, you will cheat, you will steal, and you may even kill if you can get away with it and the stakes are rewarding enough. Hence, there is a need for a system of oversight and punishment, and that is allowed by the extraterrestrial overseers. But meanwhile, they can play games with you to test you, to push your limits, to see what they can make you do. You will, at a minimum, suffer from their manipulations, and the ripple effect of negativity will spread outward. With this going on worldwide at all levels of society, it is amazing the world has not fallen apart by now. But the danger signs are all around you that this is underway and being encouraged.
Well, Grader points out that the ETs, the interlopers, up to this point, have not risked overplaying their hand to arouse suspicion. That's something they've wanted to keep in place. They don't want us suspecting, ETs especially of causing the problem. But we're told that's about to change. That with disclosure they will be quote unquote overplaying their hand, perhaps.
Well, time will tell. This is going to be a while yet till they make their appearance. They're working towards ramping up adversity for us so that we will be bewildered, feeling overwhelmed, and seeking a savior. And then they're going to step forward and say, gee, would you like some help? We're
Yeah.
here to help you. Look what's going on. You guys aren't doing so well. And the ruse is because they're causing it.
Right.
They're all in league together, all of the ETs, all of them. There are no benevolent ETs that are here and that are in the physical. This
Well,
whole galaxy is tainted now. We're the only ones left who have a chance of still getting into divine alignment if we've strayed a little bit. But this is more doable for us than any other race of beings now. So it's up to us to rein this in.
well, that's the key point that I think a lot of this is going to turn on, is this whole fundamental assertion that there's good ETs and bad ETs. And rather than what our message is, no, they're all bad. So that's going to be a big divide, and it's going to be interesting to try to cover that. So for sure. U.S. Creator has warned us that humanity faces tidal power outages imminently. Because the ETs have a vendetta against the United States for its role in the Allied victory in World War II, the United States is the first target. The Rocky Mountain Institute published an article on their website entitled, quote, Reality Check, the United States has the only major power grid without a plan, unquote. It turns out the United States doesn't have one grid, it really has three, and they are almost completely isolated from each other. And even within these grids, there is a distinct lack of coordination and planning. Is this absence of coordination largely a result of mind control manipulation? Are these tidal power outages designed to exploit this weakness?
All right. And this is creator's perspective. The thesis you are building here in your question is a perceptive and accurate picture. As far as it goes, things are worse than they seem on the surface. It is more like a house of cards. As with all advanced technologies, meaning anything involving tools and devices other than what is possible to do by hand alone, these are largely inherited from the extraterrestrial overseers who have allowed incremental progress for human society to learn about manipulating the environment in ways to create useful machines and tools to make things and ways to produce energy for heating dwellings during the cold and cooling during times of elevated temperature, ways to power vehicles, provide lighting so you're not at the mercy of the setting sun to end your day's productivity, and have greater and greater reach and power through communications and exchange of information via computers and the internet. The trade off in all cases, unfortunately, will be a downside. And this is a clever strategy as well as a deception to lure you into adopting technological solutions that have a kind of poison pill, a negative aspect that is not appreciated at first, but will work against you in some way over time. The advent of electric power generation sufficient to provide energy for a large region has enabled people to expand the array of lifestyle choices tremendously, as you can live in many areas that would be difficult to survive in during extremes of weather, both hot and cold, without electric power for central heating and cooling. The risk then is first and foremost a growing dependence on having that abundant electrical power available continually. When every major need and function requires a flow of electricity, when power gets shut off for an entire region, the impact is devastating. There can be no commerce because in today's world, it depends on electronic devices that are electrical, and people will become increasingly isolated because telecommunications will be compromised because they too are electrically powered and must have batteries recharged at intervals, not to mention the generation of the powerful microwave signals needed. The plan to cause large scale power outages is entirely sinister. First on the agenda is to disrupt things, cause confusion, uncertainty, and fear, and all of the economic loss that will become compounded over time when eventually most of a country has a period of being shut down. The ultimate plan is to bring the world to its knees through a series of calamities that will be seen as unprecedented, ultimately, and suspected of having a sinister cause. And that too is deliberate because the interlopers are working towards an extraterrestrial disclosure. They are preparing you for a grand deception. You will be begging for a savior to make sense of things and make things run well again and save you from the downward spiral that will get underway from all of the negative things being unleashed. At some point, the extraterrestrials will make an appearance with an offer to help you do better in running the world. Their story will be that the dark reptilian race of extraterrestrials is harassing and manipulating the Earth, putting you in grave danger, and you need extraterrestrial help by the benevolent races to save you. In actuality, all of the extraterrestrials are in league with the reptilians working together. You will need divine help to free you from the workings of this evil cabal.
Well, there you go. Creator just throws that on the table right there. That this is going to be blamed on one particular race of ETs, and another race of ETs is going to be parading as our potential saviors. The interesting thing about the power outages is that this question was framed earlier with no with an article that was mentioned about the fact that the grids are not really connected. And so, if these are cascading tidal power outages from going from one grid to another, these grids aren't connected. So, how can a problem that affects one grid, affect the other grid? Even in terms of like their internal computer systems, they're not connected to the internet, and that's one of the reasons why hacking them is extremely difficult, if not really impossible, from that standpoint. So this is gonna be a mystery if it happens. That they're really going to be scratching their heads and going, "How? What is the explanation for this? It really doesn't make sense." But in the context of what creator is sharing here, it makes all the sense in the world.
Well, we'll see what society makes of it and what the officials say. And they'll come up with some kind of interpretation, some sort of explanation or excuse. This is politics as
Oh yeah,
well. There's an overlay, and the government always wants to make itself look good. And so we'll see. But the plan we know is to do 4 or 5 of these over the course
good.
of this year. So that's what's going to be the game changer here. They're
Yeah,
going to come out of the closet. So they're going to start showing their handiwork more and more overtly. They're already doing this with sightings that so many have seen
right.
of craft flying around in the skies that are otherworldly.
Yeah. Well, beware of what government tells you because we have the Texas deep freeze power outage in 2021 as an example. You can Google that. You can look on YouTube for stories about it. Over 1,000 people died of hypothermia, and the whole time they were listening to the radio, the officials kept saying the power is imminently going to be back on again. No, don't panic, don't rush, don't leave your house, shelter in place. And 1,000 people died as a direct result. So, yeah, you got to be skeptical about what the politicians tell you on this stuff.
Well, again, remember, they're not in control.
Right?
They're being manipulated
Yeah,
always
yeah,
in what they do and say. They're heavily mind controlled, more than the average person, because they have a position of authority. So
yep.
they're just puppets. They're minions of the darkness, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, U.S. creator, humanity appears to suffer from an extreme case of short-sightedness. Obviously, this can be partially explained by our relatively short lifespans. But even within the life of a single person, it's unusual to expect anything outside of a house to last for more than a decade. And many things don't even last that long. This is like an artificial hardship that is imposed and self imposed. Many refrigerators, for instance, built in the 1950s, still work today like new, while today's high end models need expensive servicing, often just months after purchase. It's as if our lives are intentionally designed to break and break often and expensively. We know planned obsolescence is real, but this is getting extreme now. It appears we do it to ourselves. Is this appearance deceiving? What is creator's perspective?
All right, this is Creator's answer. We can tell you with authority that the growing and almost universally adopted strategy of planned obsolescence has been orchestrated by the extraterrestrial alliance to undermine the world, reduce efficiency, increase cost burdens, and hinder your progress. This is all done by mind control. It is easy to convince corporate overseers to engineer their products to be just so long lived, so they will need to be replaced at intervals. This is hugely wasteful, inefficient, and a drain on productivity. The fact it is being done deliberately to cause harm is a reflection of the evil of the interlopers running things. It is not the human leaders acting solely through the corrupting influences of greed and self interest, finding clever ways to make more profit for themselves. It is an actual manipulation to change the inner beliefs and thinking of the people doing the planning, to corrupt them, make them short sighted, and blind to their contribution to this overall lessening of the quality of life and human progress as a whole, because so much time and energy gets consumed by running in place, in effect, because things only last so long and then break down and require expensive replacements. You see as well in this a large component of complacency being necessary for such a scheme to be tolerated. So, the key to this, having the desired negative impact, is not to keep it hidden and unnoticed, which is actually impossible because to lose something like an appliance creates an immediate inconvenience and impact on things and almost forces spending what it takes to replace something essential for modern living. But what is engendered within the minds of people is a general complacency to accept a lower standard for the functioning and reliability of consumer goods and products. There is no hue and cry demanding quality and a long, useful life. This is the kind of cheapening that is reinforced through mind control to emphasize the relentless pursuit of the cheapest version of something and to believe that will suffice, at least until proven otherwise. So people are manipulated into becoming almost robot like and not thinking strategically about the cost outlay versus the useful life of things. Indeed, in this environment, the manufacturer with the better product will almost always suffer and be hindered in successful competition with the ready availability of much cheaper alternatives. And they may be driven out of business entirely. In prior eras, many people would appreciate the value of longevity and the higher quality that adds substance to performance, and would simply save money until they had enough to buy something that would last, in preference to something shoddy that might help them get by, but ultimately would wear out too and work less well in the bargain. Those perspectives have been overridden by mind control programming in the majority of consumers.
That's a perfect example of the kind of schizophrenia that's going on. I think Creator brilliantly outlines the issue here. On the one hand, people still have a almost insane expectation that the stuff they're going to buy is going to last for, a long period of time, right? You go buy a refrigerator, you're still expecting it to last 10 years, even though you don't have to survey your family and friends very long to find somebody who bought one and had it crap out on them after months or a couple of years. So our expectations are not aligned with reality at all. And this is a result of mind control manipulation as well.
Well, this is a very important takeaway from what we're trying to do today. When I've talked about mind control manipulation over the years, people's eyes glaze over and they just kind of want to go away. And that's part of the complacency
Yeah.
programming, to not listen to people like me because we're just kind of weird and erratic and there's nothing to see here and everything's fine. And there can't be some grand conspiracy going on. But all these examples are giving you the same take home message. We're being manipulated over and over and over relentlessly, 24/7, and it is working because it's controlling everything in ways that are harmful. Not totally. So we have a certain amount of freedom, but it's more like we're in a prison and we get to wander from cell to cell, and we go from one cell block to another cell block, and we can maybe even journey from one prison to another prison. And that's the illusion that we're free, but we're really not. We're very constrained,
Oh
and
yeah.
we're held down and held back as a culture, and that's devastating.
And the person that, rolls their eyes and says, you know what, I got a golf game to get to is going to end up on the course and rent the cart. The cart's going to fail on them at the first hole. So, there's no escaping this anyway. Oh, US creator. Right alongside planned obsolescence is a puzzling aversion implementing redundancy. Yet redundancy has been proven time and again to be worth the expenditure. Most yachts have two engines just for this reason. Yet there's a visible move away from redundancy in all aspects of life. Single points of failure are becoming the norm and are one of the ways planned obsolescence is designed in. Yet it's a kind of insanity to surround ourselves with things that fail quickly, and fail totally, beyond repair. It's one thing if a phone's charging, it's one thing if it's a phone charging cord, which we've probably all gone through dozens of them, right, Carl? And yet another thing when it's a critical life support appliance like a furnace. The vast majority do not have any backup heat source, for instance. A tidal power outage will expose this lack of foresight like nothing else. Yet we've had warnings about this, such as the 2021 Texas deep freeze that took over 1,000 lives. Yet it seems almost no one has learned anything from it. What is creator's perspective?
All right. Creator says, we can tell you that this vulnerability is intentional and has been planned and engineered and designed into the system to create the house of cards you have come to depend on. Mind control manipulation can be done on any level to any degree and can be used to engineer a quite intricate and complicated series of maneuvers that conspire over time to create a nightmarish scenario quite difficult to undo. The more sinister objective than causing a period of inconvenience and perhaps personal discomfort if a power outage happens during bad weather, so people are subjected to extreme cold, for example, is that they want to have a steady drumbeat of adversity where things taken for granted, like having electric power wherever they go, will be unavailable. And people will be ill equipped to do much of anything, to live normally and get anything useful done. What is expected is this will cause a tremendous shock and a ramping up of great fear as people observe these outages start to spread. And as they move around the world, this will become terrifying. It is bad enough to think that what people count on might be unreliable after all, with too much being taken for granted and now undergoing increasing failure. The other alternative, that there could be something sinister behind the power outages, is even more unthinkable in terms of being a terrifying possibility, but that is exactly where the interlopers want to take you. So, over time, with repeated episodes during the course of the year, there will be a gradual awakening to the realization there is something going on behind the scenes. There has to be. That will put you right where they want you, in a state of fear and uncertainty, and hoping desperately for some answers that will solve the problem and get things back to normal. They are counting on this to be the case as a lead up to the disclosure that is planned. They want to win you over and allow them to have greater power and influence. Unfortunately, that will be taking power away from you. And this puts the world at grave risk because if humans line up with the extraterrestrials willingly and not with the divine, it will not be possible to block what happens next because humans will have chosen their fate. And even though unwittingly, it will count because the divine cannot go against human free will choices.
Well, we are looking at interesting times for sure. That with a world full of the Pollyannas, especially the first world anyway, the wealthy areas of the world, full of Pollyannas that live their life with distractions and have the money they need to travel and bring their children up and send them to college and just live the normal life, the American dream that's being lived everywhere around the world nowadays. Um, the ETs plan to put that in the crosshairs and shake that up, and uh, that's what creators telling us. Not looking forward to it, Carl.
Well, we have to face reality and it's unfolding all around us. People are wondering what's going on. The world doesn't seem to be like it used to. And they're right, those who notice, but the rest are still asleep. So we'll see how things go over time.
Yeah. U.S. creator, do the Amish have a collective divine life mission to act as a backup, a failsafe, in case of a long-term grid collapse? They have single-handedly ensured that the old ways of self-sufficiency and self-reliance are preserved and can be quickly taught to others if desperately needed. Were these times foreseen and the Amish volunteered to play this role? What can creator tell us?
All right, Creator says, your question is describing things not far from the truth. In your thinking about the current state of the world and reflecting on the fragility of the modern conveniences you rely on, and also the vulnerability to have the underpinnings fail spectacularly to catapult you back to a primitive existence, you are seeing through this lens a deeper truth. The lifestyle of the Amish, widely regarded as highly peculiar and seemingly self denying and self penalizing, in studiously avoiding most modern conveniences, has a basic authenticity and sound foundation because it counts on what people can do with their own personal energy in most respects. And while that lacks the modern touch, the devices and gimmicks technology can entice people with, the Amish lifestyle has integrity, substance, and a reliable continuity of functioning consistently and well. People have well defined roles that are concrete, measurable, and visible to all. So, from the perspective of an outsider, they might live quite primitively, having to farm their own food, tending livestock, learning carpentry to build their homes and barns, and many other implements needed for daily living, and so on. But the Amish are quite happy. And in fact, in many ways, it is a superior lifestyle because it precludes the frivolous, the inconsequential, the indulgences that squander resources, time, and opportunity. The easier life gets, the easier it is to need amusements to substitute for tangible accomplishments as a reward and gratification. It is when people have time on their hands, they can indulge in drinking and drug use as a lifestyle and still keep going. General affluence may keep them propped up enough to survive sponging off others or engaging in something unsavory, but lucrative enough to get by. The Amish know something most people do not. That virtue is its own reward. Cutting corners may create the illusion of getting ahead, but ultimately there is a loss that must be reckoned with. Doing things the easy way does not build muscles or character either. The gradual displacement of the early ways of living off the land in a close knit community close to nature by an increasing technological intrusion sold to you through manipulation as representing signs of progress has been devastating and causing moral decline and decay almost to the point of no return. It is not too late to wake up and recognize what has been lost and seek a way to rebalance things.
So this is a fascinating answer, and Creator said that we were not far off with the question that was asked in terms of them perhaps being a safety net. Um, I do want to say though to people that we've been told recently the interlopers want to keep the internet on. They want to keep some infrastructure because that will be necessary in order to bring the disclosure to bear. Um, so we're not anticipating them to completely trash, you know, our modern civilization, and so we're forced to actually turn to the Amish to survive. But that could have been put in place as a divine backstop because the Amish have been around for a couple of centuries now, at least a century and a half or so. And if you're looking forward, for even from the divine perspective, a couple hundred years ago, things may not have been quite as detailed and laid out as they are now. So at 150 years ago, this would have been a good stopgap. Today, don't know, but they're certainly worth looking at. We could probably do an entire show on the Amish, so maybe we will someday, Carl.
Well, I agree with you. And Creator often will selectively answer certain things of the multi-component questions you ask. And part of it is a time constraint, and part of it is it may get things a little off track as it's widening the discussion. There are many examples one can point to of models, role models, standards, and would-be heroes that are marching to their own drummer, but leading us in certain respects, certainly more in divine alignment than average. And so I think this is a good example of something that is supported and fostered by the divine realm. It's got to be, to keep surviving and not be contaminated and won over and corrupted
Yeah,
like most of the world has been.
yeah, that's remarkable in its own right.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because they do exactly. They seem to be impervious to the mind control for the most part. I'm not going to say that they have not been affected at all. That would be a bit extreme to suspect that, but they've certainly been less influenced by the rest of the world, and that's remarkable in its own right.
Well, and I think it's an example of what life would look like if people were more devout,
Yeah. Hmm.
more rigorous in hewing to their belief in a higher power and what that truly means and discerning it accurately enough for themselves to say, no, I'm not going to be following things that are loosey goosey and potentially destructive just because they might be fun for a time.
Right.
And they just discard that and will not buy it. And that is saving them.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting case study for sure. U.S. Creator, another area where redundancy suffers is communications. We have become overly dependent on cell phones almost exclusively to the point that even home internet is now going cellular. If the cell network fails, there's literally no backup for most people in many functions. What we know about restarting a grid after an outage is that real time voice and data communications are critical and indispensable. Is there enough redundancy left in the system to provide for in the upcoming forecast outages? Or will extraordinary interventions be required, such as engaging the military to bring in battlefield communications equipment in order to provide the needed connections and networks necessary to perform the grid restarts? What can Creator tell us?
All right, Creator says, while this precise scenario might not be needed at this point, humanity is certainly extremely vulnerable and becoming so dependent on this single technology to control a greater and greater percentage of necessary day-to-day functions. And this leads to obvious and somewhat embarrassing situations on occasion when a cell phone is not set up properly or has a glitch of some kind, leaving a person completely helpless to take part in life because they need their cell phone to do something critical. It is amusing to see people in a situation where they cannot prove their identity and be accepted in some kind of transaction agreement or even gaining access to a venue because they can't pull up a necessary coding on their cell phone to get through a security checkpoint, for example, to board a plane or carry out a bank transaction. So the warning signs have been there all along, but with the enforced complacency, little has been done about this, and it may well be things come to a head if cell phone availability is compromised due to lack of power for functioning of the cell phone towers, not to mention the need for recharging from another source of electricity. What has happened is that it used to be the case that people were aware of their vulnerability because communication was more challenging and less certain to begin with. So this was thought about a lot to put some kind of infrastructure in place and to have emergency backup systems in the event of an outage. So with the advent of the telephone, an army of ham radio operators sprang up who could communicate with one another over long distances if there were a disruption of telecommunications. They could communicate anywhere in the world using relays of radio operators handing off messages to be transmitted onwards. The problem in today's world is that it is not simply transmitting simple communications like a phone call that are lost with a cell phone outage, but commerce as well will be compromised. People conduct the entirety of their business affairs on their cell phones via the internet and a series of specialized applications that carry out needed functions. So this is now a case of having all the eggs in one basket. And if the signals are compromised, the whole system may collapse.
Ugh. You know, the thing about ham radio is I actually know somebody who's into ham radio, and it has gotten really difficult to get into. It's expensive, there's training involved, and there's not an encouragement to engage in this hobby. So the ham community isn't what it used to be, and it's much more compromised and idiosyncratic than ever before. So like everything else, it's been compromised, right? It's still there, but it's not the same as it used to be, and it certainly doesn't have the emphasis it once had.
Well, this is true across the board. Anything that could be an alternative, that could be a backup, an emergency go to. We always had people like those ham radio people who were drawn to it. And for good reason, because it makes sense and it's probably divinely inspired
Yeah, I was going to
to
say
be so.
divinely inspired,
Yeah,
indeed.
yeah.
Yeah,
But this all gets discouraged and suppressed, if possible, by the government
yeah.
and other influences directly on people to turn away, become disinterested. So and non-believers in something that it might be more in alignment.
And Creator said that the exact scenario we painted out of needing to bring in battlefield communications equipment to get the grid restarted didn't look like it was going to be needed at this point. I noted those words.
Well, keep
Down
in
the
mind, I don't want to mislead people to think we're going to lose everything. There was going to be periodic outages to
Yeah,
create fear and uncertainty. But like Brian was saying a little bit ago, they do want to have the lights on when they do their reveal, when they come out of the
yeah,
closet. So they're not
right.
going to shut down the world. They're going to just shake us up.
Yep, that's the intent. U.S. creator, another problematic dependency is GPS, the global positioning system, which almost everyone relies on today. So much so that paper maps are disappearing, and most young people under 40 have no idea how to even read one. If this fails, many people will be utterly lost just a mile or two from their own homes. Does Creator foresee this as being a problem?
Creator says the following. This is another good example of technological dependency, lulling people into a false sense of security through making things easier. The less work people have to do, the less they have to think, the less effort they have to expend. Just like muscles waste away when they're not used, the brain can waste away through becoming increasingly passive when devices are doing even the thinking for you. Prior to the advent of the global positioning system grid covering most of the planet, people had to read the stars, use compasses and other devices. Maps were of critical importance and a necessity to plan and execute a journey of any kind. The inconvenience in getting out a map and then having to fold it up again and store it away was an incentive for people to build a cognitive map so they would remember a route once taken. And that would serve to build brain power and an inner convenience just as reliable or more so than the GPS systems of today, which are not perfect. So again, there is a vulnerability not appreciated that if suddenly the GPS system was shut down, drivers would become largely helpless to journey anywhere unfamiliar without something to guide them. In an emergency, maps might be hard to find, and that could lead to many tragic circumstances, or at a minimum, much lost productivity while scrambling to find the information needed to get to a destination. So, here again, there is a combination of an almost reckless reliance on technology for necessary function that determines human safety and security, and a complacency to live without uncertainty and not recognize the dangers it brings enough to take precautions, at least for many who just assume that electronic system will be available always.
There's a question that was submitted for this show that was left out, and Carl, you have to leave some questions out because there's just too much material to squeeze into an hour. But I only raised this because I think the question that was left out had one point I think the audience should hear, and that is that creators said that planned obsolescence is not something they do to their own societies. They only do it to worlds that they're victimizing. And I thought that was an important insight to share, Carl.
Well, they're running a prison.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear. And if you look around the world and look at history, which repeats itself, why should that be? Why do we never seem to learn that wars just breed new wars and harm both the victor and the vanquished? But yet here we are. We're at war multiple places in the world and looming wars menacing us. So what's wrong with the picture is we're not getting the take home lessons and we're not being allowed to do something different. That's a shocking way to look at things,
Yeah.
but it fits the data, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we don't even have to go back very far to see that the world was different. I mean, there's Roman roads and aqueducts that are still in use today, and we can't even get 5 years out of a road without having to be repaved nowadays. That's how extreme the difference is in just a couple thousand years. So, yeah, this idea that the ETs don't do this to themselves and it's only reserved for us should really make people stop and think. It makes no sense that we do this to ourselves, and yet people are complacent, sit back. That too is mind control manipulation. So the question is, Carl, how do we get past all of this? And that's the question we're going to ask right now. Somewhere there is a wise balance between the extremes of paranoia and pie in the sky Pollyannas who cannot or refuse to see danger in front of their noses. How can empowered prayer, the Lightworker Healing Protocol, deep subconscious memory reset, and divine life support help to correct this widespread imbalance and short sightedness that is so epidemic in today's world? And creators share with us why it is wise to expect the unexpected.
All right, here we go. This is Creator's answer. The time honored saying is forewarned is forearmed. Your questions are a warning, we hope, is loud and clear, pointing out the many pitfalls of modern existence and its dangers, and that there's something sinister behind it all. That is a very unfortunate and unhappy reality no one wants to hear, and many will not believe. But here again are consequences of mind control manipulation and enforced complacency. These days, it is hard to get people to even pay attention, let alone heed warnings, taking them seriously enough to act and taking precautions for backup capabilities and strategies. In a world where half have gone mad and the other half, as often as not, just look the other way because it is too much trouble to try to do something about it, there is an urgent need to overcome the manipulations corrupting the world and distorting thinking of people almost universally to settle for less, as much through complacency as necessity at this point. The problem is that downward spiral can reach a point of no return, a tipping point that may take you under. This the extraterrestrials want to arrange. What is needed is a solution to turn things around, something that is effective, practical, and within human capability. We have been helping the team at Get Wisdom ferret out the truth of things and all that is wrong and why. Your channel has spearheaded the search for the solution and how best to implement it effectively. The answer seems, at first blush, trivial, that what is needed is divine intervention. That has historically been seen as the answer again and again, but all too often ended with meager results and seemingly unanswered prayers. Things can change now with the advent of the healing work that has been devised through partnership with Creator via channeling to better understand the need for healing and how to effectively request the high level divine healing strategies that can only be done by us and not at the human level directly. That is the ultimate answer you have needed all along, but lacked the wisdom to know what to request and why it was needed. Being held down, held back, and kept in the dark largely about understanding what you are up against and how it could be overcome and what that would take. That basic information has now been obtained and turned into effective healing protocols. The Lightworker Healing Protocol and Deep Subconscious Memory Reset. Together, they could address all the sources of negativity and their consequences in altering the mind and body, corrupting the spirit, and dooming your future. The problem of evil, brought to you by the Dark Extraterrestrial Alliance and the Dark Spirit Meddler cohort they direct and have weaponized against you, can only be surrounded with divine assistance. What is needed is to partner with the divine, and that is best done through those tools because of their comprehensive nature and broad coverage, and their effectiveness in carrying out deep karmic repair for all that is needed to reverse inner corruption and inner roadblocks through the ability of the divine to resolve trauma and release stored negativity, undermining a person mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. This can make them whole and functional again by replacing negative limiting beliefs with a positive alternative, and to deal with soul damage through restoring and amplifying needed soul attributes that are the basic wherewithal for normal and effective functioning in life. What needs to be realized here is that you are coming from behind, having lived hundreds of lifetimes as a human being in a toxic environment, suppressed and subjugated by overseers, making life hard, challenging you, and manipulating your personal lives and your very thoughts to serve their dark aims. Not only do the interlopers have the power to make you suffer, they enjoy doing it, and it is their chief pastime to torment you. Healing is the answer. It will raise up the interlopers ultimately to give up their evil ways. In the meantime, what is needed is a turning point to get them to depart for a while, to take a break from their hands on management of the world, a kind of vacation that will give a span of time to allow human healing to advance sufficiently for there to be an ascension. This will be a true graduation and a turning point for the divine human enterprise. You were created to solve the problem of evil. And if you can accomplish this turnaround at this critical juncture when everything is on the line and your very survival depends on it, it will be a stellar achievement that will live for all of time as the greatest of accomplishments. And the benefits will flow forever. Not only can you receive needed healing, you can learn to heal others with these protocols and contribute to the turnaround directly through the pooling of energies from the many sources of leveraging within the protocols. A pool of healing attention will be created and will continue to be utilized and repurposed again and again and again. And through time, it will reach and heal all of the depraved beings. This you can do, working together in partnership with the divine realm, but must be your choice. We can assure you it is your purpose for being here.
We've harped on the complacency that's a huge problem with humanity right now. And I think that complacency is fueled by a sense of helplessness that people look at all the problems in the world and shrug and say, there's nothing I can do to change this. I might as well go play golf. And we're here to tell you that that's not the case. Now, we don't want to necessarily say you can't play golf, but you really should be partnering with us and learning these protocols to help heal and save humanity, Carl.
Well, we've been given the charter, we've been shown how to do it, we've been warned, and the proof is all around us that the data fit this mosaic we've been laying out for years now. But we're fighting the headwinds of mind control suppression, subjugation of people, distractions of myriad kinds. So this isn't easy, but there is a cadre of people who are like-minded, who are working steadily with us on this enterprise. And we are told we're making progress. We can use more. The more who join, the better this will go, because it is a question of choice. The ETs could annihilate us anytime they want. They have the power, but they're being constrained through the workings of the divine. And in looking at the future, they see the way to get that done is if they corrupt us to believe in them and side with them, line up with them, select them to be our leaders out in the open. That is how they will then be able to annihilate us. It will be our surrender. So even if Creator's got a finger in the dike on our behalf, we can take that away through our choice to side with the enemy. That is truly what is happening. So being on the sidelines means you are being lined up as a victim. You aren't going to escape that fate. Someone is going to have to speak for you and do your work for you. It'd be much better if you got in the game and applied yourself. Learn more about this at least to make a sound decision and maybe overcome some inner corruption of your own and resistance internally. Because we understand this is a message that's hard to swallow.
Yeah. I want to add that, people look at this and go, oh, this can't be ETs doing it. If they wanted to wipe us out, they could just push a button and make that happen. Well, yes, they could. They could push a button and Death Star us like in Star Wars. That there's no doubt that they have that ability. But this is a game for them. And it's as unthinkable for them to change the outline of their game than it is to imagine watching an NFL football game and the coach just decide, you know what, I don't want to play anymore. Okay, guys, let's go to the locker room in the middle of the third quarter. You're not going to see that. Okay, people, we take our games very seriously, and they take their games very, very seriously, deadly serious, in fact. So listen carefully to this narrative that we painted out through Get Wisdom for the last 7 years, because it's real. And even though you can think, well, they could wipe us out tomorrow, yes, but they're not going to do that any more than a coach is going to wave his team off the field in the middle of third quarter of a typical NFL game. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's all we have for this week's Get Wisdom, Carl. Or this month's, I should say, Get Wisdom. We'll be back next month with another one. God willing. Thanks, everybody.
Be well.